Joining me now is Evan Lucas, the Chief Market Strategist at InvestSMART. Evan, good morning to you. The final major piece of Australian data today with the release of the November employment numbers. Which way do you expect them to go?
They'll probably be flat again, unfortunately, Pete. And look, everybody was hoping that you might get that little kick before the end of the year with regards to the employment numbers, but all of the leading indicators into today's numbers suggest not. Again, it's not surprising. Hiring before Christmas also tends to be quite slow anyway, but it would suggest that the unemployment rate will probably again hold at about 5.2, the wrong direction for what the government and the RBA needs, and that participation is holding quite nicely, but not seeing any form of pull down on the things that we need to actually see, which is what we call the slack, which is underemployment and underutilisation. That will remain basically near 6-year highs. I
guess 5.2 better than 5.3 though?
Yeah, that's an argument. I know I like it in terms of where you're sitting, but it's more than that. As I said, the thing that we look at, particularly what the RBA really points out with regards to wage growth, is underutilisation. So that's under those that are unemployed, that 5.2 figure, and those that are underemployed, those that are working but need to work more, part-time people. That's around about 13.5%. That needs to come down to about 12, probably more likely 11.5, to see any form of meaningful movement in wages.
The banking scandal, Evan, well, it rolls on, but can it get any worse?
Probably not. I must admit, and the reason I say that is that yesterday's the NAB numbers, although obviously it was quite a big story, we sort of knew that with regards to the Banking Royal Commission. We knew that they had been charging fee for service. It's why Andrew Thorburn had been basically pushed out, along with Ken Henry. It's all what came out, and that's all of the figures now that ASIC had with regards to where they believe there was fee for no service. So NAB was the biggest one and probably the worst one from the Banking Royal Commission. It probably, again, and the reason I say it probably can't get any worse with regards to where we sit is that the share pricing is certainly reflecting all of that issue. And therefore, even if there was an additional numbers, all of it is now starting to get priced in. So probably not any further from a share price point of view. It doesn't mean they can't tell you something horrible again, but I don't think you're going to see a share price go any further.
Evan, what about Australia's exports? It registered a new all-time record. So do you expect that to continue into next year?
Yeah, $281 billion this year, which is a record, as you just alluded to, Pete. It's not just down to iron ore, LNG and also coal have been massive drivers. Yes, I do expect it to continue into the first half of next year. There is still fairly abnormal conditions in those markets. So Brazil is still offline with some seriously horrible environmental issues that have happened. It's therefore seen the actual amount of supply of iron ore, particularly on market, significantly lower than what was expected. But that will pick up. Brazil will come back online, most likely around about August next year. So it's not next year, it's 2021. And that's certainly what most people expect, is that once they're back online, the iron ore price will probably drop by about $20 a tonne. That's a big problem for future expectations around surpluses for the government.
Evan, what about this? It's really interesting, this huge fine. Google copped about $500 million fine from the Australian government. That's a pretty significant win. I'm actually surprised that they coughed up in the end.
Yeah, so this is probably bigger than just the Australian story. And the reason I say that is Google is fighting this same issue in about 4 or 5 other countries. So it's doing it in the UK, it's doing it in Germany. There are also questions around their tax haven issues with Ireland as well. Facebook's the other one to sort of point out here in terms of what they sit. So it is significant from the point of view that it's more the fact that Google settled quickly and want to basically admit no liability. And that also probably extends to the fact that Australia could have been a precedent to actually therefore take bigger legal cases to those other countries where there are obviously larger amounts of populations and therefore the probability of tax violation being even higher. So it is a significant step. The government will certainly see it as a win, and they should. Tax for multinational tech companies is a very, very hard thing, considering that the ability to actually work out where they're domiciled, where earnings happen, makes it very, very tricky in a globalised digital world. So it's a good, significant step, but Google would be looking at this on a bigger picture, which is how they deal with their issues in Europe. And the other one that I haven't really looked at yet is what happens in Asia, and particularly places like Japan and Southeast Asia, where Google is very heavily used. They're also facing similar questions.
Yeah, I mean, Facebook's had to recently cough up too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And they're the big ones. And then the other part of this whole thing is that it can also play out politically back in the US. The antitrust scenario with Google, with Facebook, you can also sort of argue things like Disney as well as facing something, questions like it, about the ability to be this massive, almost monopoly in that space and the possibility of breaking it up. And that's the other part of it is that if you can start seeing these issues, Congress could use this quite nicely as well to sort of really harp through on that antitrust issue.
Yep, all right. Well, speaking of Congress, there's a bit going on there today as well. Evan Lucas, really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us as always. Good to talk.
Thanks, Pete. Merry Christmas.